So the naked bike market is one of the best sectors in motorcycling right now. Some cracking examples across the board. But if you're not hung up on big capacity, big power and big price tags, the good news is that the sub-litre scene is absolutely rife with prime picking. So we've gathered together for the best examples on the market to put them through their paces and figure out which is the best on the road. Let's go meet our contenders.
This is the MV Agusta Brutale 800RR. The Brutale's been around for a really, really long time, but this, the third generation version, gets a 3-cylinder 800cc engine, and for this year gets a big update on the electronics. The 800cc engine makes about 140 horsepower, and this is the Gucci option. This is KTM's all-new Duke 990. Parallel twin CC engine, which is actually 947, so don't be fooled by the name 990. This is a completely new bike for this year. Only the brake calipers and the front wheel share the same part number with anything else in the KTM range. By far the lightest bike on test, 20 kilos lighter than the Ducati and 9 kilos lighter than the Triumph. A bike that really doesn't need any introduction. Triumph Street Triple 765 RS. Got a massive update last year to the engine, which got a 7 horsepower increase overall on top end power, but also the geometry. Triumph went racy with the Street Triple this year, and they've shortened the wheelbase, raised the rear ride height, and added a couple of teeth on the rear sprocket. The Ducati Street Fighter V2, based heavily on the Panigale V2, so that means it gets the same V-twin 955cc engine, which makes 153 horsepower, by far the most powerful bike on the test here. Big on spec, big on price, bellissimo.
So they're the bikes, and these are the tyres we've fitted to each of them. They're Bridgestone's new S23 Hypersport tyres. Going to be fantastic on the road, and we're also going to be putting them through their paces on the track with these bikes later on for a separate video, so make sure to check that out too.
So we've just been a few days out on these brilliant bikes. In first place is not this bike, but before we get into it, I wanted to just share a little bit of pub ammo with you on this bike that I've not told you up to now. Did you know, Bruce, that since the Brutale came out in 2001, there have been no fewer than 43 special editions?
Have there actually?
There has actually been 43 special editions.
And how many units have sold?
About 40
That's
or
the
42,
question.
yeah. No, so MV love a special edition
Yeah.
on this bike over the years, and it's had all sorts, I think 10 different engines the Brutale's had, and this of course is the third
There
generation.
have actually been 43 special.
43, but they do like a Lewis Hamilton one,
Jesus.
an RCS one. And,
Have you had one?
No.
A Johnny Mac special?
Not yet.
Brutale?
Not yet, no, somehow I don't think we will after this.
Chances are gone now, aren't they?
No. But hey, listen,
Jesus.
we're being hard on it. The reason for mentioning that though is I think over the years, MV Agusta have done this thing where they, rather than going big on updates and evolving the bike, they put some paintwork on it and a bit of carbon and call it a special edition.
Right.
And that's how they've kind of shifted the units over the years. But it's only been updated 3 times. This is the third generation one. And it's got 140 horsepower. So it's the second most powerful bike on test. But it just kind of really didn't do it for us, did it?
No, I mean, on face value, it's a nice looking bike. It's probably the shortest of the bikes we've got here on test. It's relatively aggressive in the stance, especially for a road bike, a naked road bike. It looks the part, it sounds the part. It sounds super exotic with the triple motor in this thing as well. Yeah, there's lots to like about it, lots of detail. It should appeal, but the truth is, I think for the road, what we found was it's really quite focused, yet not refined, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think that's where we got to.
Yeah, it's kind of got that zesty, excitable motor that just wants to spin up and kick out loads and loads of drive, especially around the mid-range. It's got a surprising amount of torque, but it's also got some quite soft suspension, and we actually worked quite hard on trying to set this bike up. Yeah, we just couldn't quite get it in the sweet spot, yeah.
No, I think it feels like a bike that's kind of a little bit nervous.
Yeah.
In terms of its geometry,
Yeah.
isn't it? It feels quite short, and the front wheel's pulled in. It feels like it is anyway. So when you get it right,
Yeah.
it really turns beautifully,
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
it, on the road? It's
Yeah.
probably the keenest of turning
I think
bikes
it is
that
the
we've got.
fastest turning.
But the payoff for that is if you like hit a bump or something in the middle of the corner, it's really not happy in that scenario,
No.
is it?
It's like slapping a bull on the arse, isn't it, and holding
Exactly
on.
like that. I've never done that, but I imagine. Is that a
We'll do it
Lincolnshire
later.
thing? Is that a Lincolnshire thing?
We're off later if you want to go.
No, I've got things to do. I've got to be somewhere. No, so listen, I agree. The engine's dead keen. It always wants to rev up, doesn't it? It's and I have to say as well, hats off to MV, because one of the things over the years of riding MVs that I've always ended up being quite disappointed about is the fuel injection. And I think they've got it right on this one. It actually has a really nice touch on the throttle. I found anyway, the off-on, which was notoriously difficult on MVs for a really long time. And I think they've got that right, which is great. And the tech that's on this bike, which is the big upgrade for this latest one, was difficult to understand how to navigate it to start with. And then I think accidentally we discovered how to get into the screens and adjust everything, didn't we? And once you differentiate between the indicator switch and the mode switch, which are next to each other, aren't they?
Yeah.
So you have them above and below each other with the same orientation. So the amount of times I was thinking I was putting an indicator on, but I was actually scrolling through.
It's probably fair to say it's got a generation-old switchgear, hasn't it? You know, that's the thing. So a lot of the other bikes, you know, we'll get into them in due course, but you see the buttons, you understand what they're all about, you can get into the menu and all the rest of it, whereas, like you say, you know, you have to kind of do a tap dance with your fingers trying to get this thing to switch around. And it's like any bike, when you own it, you get used to it, it all makes sense, but it wasn't the easiest to get used to. But coming back to your point about the fueling, yeah, it was good. And there's several different rider modes. Sport on the road was a happy place to be. You know, gave a good connection delivery to that rear wheel. I liked it, but it just felt, again, coming back to the suspension. Tell you what it feels like. You've got half a race bike and half a road bike here, and they've kind of over-egged the road bike in making it so supple, but they've, you know, also over-egged the racy nature of this thing by having that kind of compact, very agile machine that can become a little bit nervous because it's got so much travel on the suspension at either end. It's not settled when you go hitting bumps or whatever in the road, but it's got that aggression as well from that engine that can upset things even further. So it feels like when you can't be chilled out on this bike. I think that's probably the best way of phrasing it. It's intense. Which kind of makes it fun. When you go flicking it around and it does have a kick or a wobble or whatever, you know, it's
your attention, doesn't it?
It's definitely not boring, and it doesn't sound boring. But if you want, you know, a refined, easy, chilled package, this isn't it. This is that kind of bike that you've got to expect excitement from.
I think as well, it demands your attention, doesn't it? And I think none of these bikes are massive, and probably none of them are really suited to my size anyway. I'm 6'3", without my heels on. This riding position for me was the worst. It's just really close into the handlebars, and the shape of the seat is there's no room to move back, and I just felt really sort of locked in. Into
big old tank as well around you, isn't it?
It is, yeah, and I just didn't like the riding position. I couldn't get comfortable on it, and when we were like throwing it around and been quite spirited, let's say, on the road, I just couldn't get into the areas I wanted to physically on this bike.
I'll tell you one thing. I mean, just to kind of touch on the braking of the bike. So actually, again, it almost sounds a little bit wrong. I'm about to give it a compliment and knock it all at the same time. But the actual performance of the brakes on this got Brembo calipers, Nissan master cylinder. So the actual braking performance is good. But how you access, you know, that braking, you have to kind of pull through this real spongy section on the lever before you get purchased. And it's the same on the F3 800, actually, which I've ridden. You know, I didn't understand it. I mean, we were just talking about it just moments ago. Not making it up, you kind of have to almost prime the brake and then it really grabs. You've got a real strong purchase, but that's not confidence inducing again when you're on the road, you know, especially if you're on rough roads or you're riding fast or whatever. Wasn't a massive fan of, you know, that side of it, but the ABS was good. There was no kind of intervention or whatever. And while I'm talking tech, I just want to give a nod to the shifter and the blipper on this thing because it's super, super sharp, both up and down the box. That clutch is so forgiving as well. You can fire down so many gears and it just absorbs whatever you put to the rear wheel. Great package. Very impressed by that. You know, one of the best parts of the bike for me. Yeah.
Well, listen, you know, I think, again, when we were talking about this earlier, I think the best way to sum this bike up is it's got a fantastic engine, great gearbox. The tech's much, much better on it. No question about that. It's got rear racy geometry. It just needs a little bit of a polish here and a little bit of a tweak there and a few parts of it just to really, really refine it. I think that's what it probably needs. But then, you know, because it's a 3-cylinder engine, you kind of end up almost in the Triumph's backyard at that point, don't you? But, you know, so it's kind of like faint praise, sort of damning praise, isn't it, almost, by putting it that way? But to compare it in the same sentence as the Triumph,
yeah, which
has been the gold standard for so long, is kind of like a backhanded compliment, isn't it?
Yeah.
I suppose. But more on that later, I guess. So this is the most powerful bike on the test at 153 horsepower, and it also belongs to Chris Walker from Chris Walker Motorcycles in Grantham. We really wanted the Street Fighter V2 on this test, so and we couldn't get hold of one from Ducati, but Chris stepped in, didn't he, and lent us his demonstrator. So massive thank you to him for making that possible. So onto the bike, we got a different opinion on this, really. I mean, we've brought it out here in 3rd place, but it's not really 3rd place, is it?
No.
We're calling it joint
second. I think the thing is that it's a cracking bike. There's no two ways about it. It's the biggest, it's the baddest, it's the reddest that we've got here. But it depends what you want from a motorcycle. So if you're happy to have, I don't know, a slightly slower turn in, that bit more physical motorcycle to hustle around, you know, especially when you're walking or whatever, then jobs are good. But this is heavy, 200 kilos. It's 21 kilos more than the KTM for context, and you feel it. It's also the hardest to wheelie, if you want to pop any wheelies on these things, to kind of first gearing up from this. It feels a very long bike, feels a very heavy bike. It feels like it actually weighs a lot more than 200 kilos, to be fair.
Funny you should say that, because it is longer than the Panigale. So obviously this is based on the Panigale, which we've already said in the intro.
As in Panigale V2.
Panigale V2, yeah. So it's got the same engine, the same front frame, you know, all the componentry. Obviously it's got a different riding position, but its wheelbase is 29 millimetres longer than the Panigale V2. So it is, you know, and that's a significant amount.
Yeah.
And obviously the seats are taller, which is part of the whole naked thing. So I think you're right, that extra length in the wheelbase it's an interesting move by Ducati, because, you know, on the road, for a bike that's aimed at road riding, essentially, or primarily, you know, you would look for maybe a little bit more agility out of the bike compared to a bike which is the Panigale, which is a track-orientated bike. You would kind of expect it to go the other way, which is what the Triumph did with their bike, where they shortened that one and raised the ride height on that.
Well, it makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, just to kind of throw in an anecdote from this test, you know, over the days, there was one time we were riding out to some bends, and Johnny turned around to me and said, "Are you all right? Are you struggling with that bike? Doesn't it look like it would turn?" Yeah. And I maybe was being a little bit lazy, but at the same time, it was a reflection of the fact that unless you put a lot of input into this machine, it doesn't turn like the others do. I mean, I can't remember, I think you were on the MV at the time.
Yeah, I was, yeah.
It probably turned circles, you know, run rings around me with how sharp that thing handles compared to this. Yeah. And that's the thing, it's like I say, if your pace is a bit more chilled, if actually what you want is a comfy riding position with a big characterful V-twin motor, jobs are good un. But actually, if you want something that's going to get stuck in, scratch away, fill you with confidence, you know, be really obliging, this isn't the bike for me. And that's why I rate it probably more towards 3rd than 2nd.
Yeah.
We agree that it's kind of, for different reasons, you know, it's joint 2nd. But this, I would say, is more 3rd for me. It's more 2nd for you. So tell me what you like about it.
So I really like the riding position. For me is a big thing on this bike, because it's a bigger bike, a longer bike.
Are you 6'2"?
I was 6'3" when we were talking about the MV. So I'm probably about 6'2" for this one.
Yeah.
It makes me feel like I'm about 6 foot. The riding position on this is great for me. It's just spacious, it's tall seat, it's a good reach to the bars. You know, I feel comfortable on this bike. And like, when I say comfortable, I don't mean in the high-vis vest brigade kind of thing. I mean
you're a couple of years away from that.
No, I'm not far off. I mean comfortable in the context of, you know, moving around the bike when you want to get a bit of a hustle on kind of thing, because as you just said, the bike needs quite a lot of input to get it to move around. The thing I was just going to mention about the engine, though, you know, we talk about it being the most powerful, and it is, but on the road, it's kind of almost irrelevant, that fact, which is it's easy to get hung up on that, but it is also largely irrelevant, because I mean, really, how many times were we up at the red line and in that area of the power curve? Yeah, on the road, it needs to be punchy and full of character in the sort of low to mid-range. That's kind of where you live, isn't it?
It is, but I'd actually stay though on this. I don't think that this bike is the most zesty down low.
Exactly.
That's the weird thing. Like, it's a big V-twin. It should be nailing it out of bends, you know, every touch of the throttle. But I'd actually put this bike, again, I don't know whether it's the weight of it or whatever, or just even that long wheelbase. I don't know what's affecting it, but it didn't feel like it was as vibrant as it should have been. It felt clinically smooth, you know, great fueling, great throttle connection. We'll come on to the tech later, but that was top drawer as well. But in terms of excitement, I actually think that this bike has got more to offer up top than it has down low. So again, that's maybe another thing that just slightly missed the mark for me. I was expecting more. I should say, this is my first ever ride of a V2 Street Fighter. You went on the launch of it. You know it better than I do. But yeah, I kind of had quite high hopes. It looks the part, it sounds the part, it's a Ducati, it's beautiful, it's hard to knock. But the truth is, it's definitely, for me, it's not perfect. And maybe I'm feeling a little bit let down. You know, I mean, maybe we should move on to the tech. So actually, this has got the smallest dash of all the bikes. It's not the end of the world, but it's just one of those facts that, you know, nowadays you're looking at machines with big, bright, colourful TFT dashes, easy to digest what's going on. That's not how it is. I think the switch gears are quite basic as well. They all work just fine. You can get in. I think one thing which is quite nice, you know, to the right-hand side of the switch gear, you're able to see exactly what wheelie control setting you're in, what traction level, all that kind of stuff. That's great. That's all there. You don't need a desktop computer-sized screen on these things. No. Ducati's electronics are probably the best in the business.
They are.
But
very good.
This is going to lead me on to say, I found this bike here had a relatively slow upshift using the quick shifter. I don't think it was as slick as, I mean, you'd know better than me. You're smarter than I am, but I'm trying to place this bike. You know, Ducati's had several enhancements to a lot of their shifter systems, a lot of their electronic suites, and trying to kind of place the tech on this bike in terms of generation. And we're talking almost a generation or two old technology on this compared to the latest Panigale. So maybe I'm looking at it from that point of view, knowing how good it is on the sports bikes and thinking, hang on, this isn't up to scratch.
It's a generation behind, isn't it? Because they did, it is on the V4 Panigales, isn't it? They have a different shift time per gear, don't they?
Is that what it is? Right, okay,
yeah.
Definitely didn't feel like this was you touch it and it goes, you know. It felt there's just a little bit of a delay, amplified by the fact because it's got that big punchy V-twin motor when you are a little bit higher up in the revs and you are shifting maybe with a bit of lean angle in. It feels like there's a lull and then a kick
to
re-engage the drive.
Yeah. Well, I'm less fussed about the dash as you are. I mean, that's a perfectly superficial thing for you to get hung up on. I can understand.
You've probably got your glasses on.
It's a generation thing. I can't see anything anyway that far ahead. Yeah, the tech is great. Obviously, it's got the separate anti-wheelie. Everything's all adjustable or switch offable. And like you say, I never sensed any intervention at any point.
Divine?
Really. Divine or otherwise. I'm a fan of this bike. I think for me, you're right. It is the heaviest. It is the laziest as well in terms of handling.
Yeah.
Again, that doesn't sort of faze me too much. It is notable though, for sure. But I think because of the space available in the riding position, I think that sort of, for me anyway, overcomes that or helps overcome that. The engine is a lovely thing as well, but it does make you wonder where they're pitching this bike, because it's also the dearest on the test, well, apart from the MV. It's 16,400 quid, so it's a chunk of change. This sector of for these bikes is all about value for money, isn't it?
Well, I've got to be honest, just to throw it out there, knowing how good the Street Fighter V4 is, I'd be aiming that a little bit more cash and getting exactly what's on offer there, because that package feels so much more refined than the
advanced,
V2.
isn't it?
Yeah. Like, it's one of those bikes that we're probably going to have to agree to disagree on, because we want different things. And, you know, for me, like I said, didn't quite tick all the boxes, but it did for you in other areas. So I want to bring on now the bike that I think is slightly better than this.
That isn't.
So here we have it. The bike, I believe, should finish second, Triumph's Street Triple 765 RS. It's such a refined motorcycle. You know, it's been around for a few years now. You went on the launch of this updated model last year in Jerez. It's just such a fantastic package. It's got a lovely triple motor, such an agile machine, beautiful handling, good brakes, good tech. There's so much to like about it, but you don't.
No, that's a bit harsh. That's a bit harsh. I've rated the Ducati in front of this purely based on the riding position because I agree with absolutely everything you said. The Street Triple is so sorted, and it should be, to be fair, because it's been around for so long. And Triumph are really, really good at constantly bringing in all the right updates. And when they went in with this one last year, visually it looks basically the same as the previous one, but mechanically and electronically and dynamically, it's completely different. Engine totally new. I think basically the capacity is the same as the previous version, which is obviously 765, but they got new cylinder head, new valve train, camshafts, pistons, conrods, gearbox. It's all brand new on this bike. And they squeeze another 7 horsepower out of it.
128 horsepower, is it?
Yeah, about that. So enough power to get your kicks, isn't it? And then they went really racy on the geometry as well. They shortened the wheelbase. They put a couple of teeth on the rear sprocket, which has shortened the wheelbase and raised the ride height. I think it was about 10 mil they put the ride height up and widened the handlebars to get even more leverage into the steering. So you can see where they went with this latest version, kind of more, I suppose maybe in the absence of, the Daytona. Well, there is a Daytona now, of course, but when this came out, there wasn't. But, any suggestion or thoughts or hopes that there might be a Daytona 765, I think was finally put to bed when they did the update on this, because they got really, really racy with it, and it is just brilliant.
The thing is, for me, it's a typical Triumph in that just the handling of the bike, the confidence you get when you're throwing this thing through corners, it's just overwhelming. Yeah. It feels so plush and planted to the ground. You can really trust in it. You can really hang off it. You can push it. That engine is so tractable, usable, good kind of fuel delivery and all the rest of it. It's a beautiful, refined motorcycle. Like I said at the start, every part of it works. And I think that when you're riding it, you're not just getting a lovely riding experience, but you're getting an audible treat as well. I mean, that triple motor sounds fantastic. It's got a great induction noise as well. I feel like it's full of character and excitement. And I should say, this is where it really, really beats the Ducati. It's so lively. If you want to cruise around in it, you can. That engine is really versatile. But if you want to kind of get that thing buzzing and hoik it up into a few wheelies or whatever, that zest is there on tap. Well. And it's just so smooth as well. That's another thing with this. Whether you're right down low in the revs or at the top, it's just consistent and nice, and I just like the way this thing performs. There are no surprises to it. It's also got a good gearbox, a good shifter and a good blipper. It's hard to fault.
I agree completely with all of that. I mean, it is one of those bikes that sells by the boatload all over the world, and there's a good reason for that. A novice can ride this bike.
What are you saying?
I'm not saying anything, don't be so touchy. So no, they could jump on this bike and be perfectly capable of having a good time on it, and then you can go and do what the sort of stuff we've been doing, going off to airfields and doing wheelies and this, that, and the other on it, no problem as well. I suppose the only two things, and this is absolutely nitpicking here from me, and again for the purpose of absolute clarity.
6'5" this time.
I think this time might be about 6'1".
Yeah,
maybe. It's a small bike, and I think for me it's just. I wouldn't like to ride it every day. I feel like a little bit like a grizzly bear in a mini moto when I ride this thing, but that's a reflection of my manliness and not any fault of the bikes. But anyway, so there's that. And the other thing I would say is the engine has, as you say, got that really lovely linear power delivery that just revs and revs and revs, and you can use it anywhere in that rev range. And because of that, it has a really flat torque curve without any real sort of lumps or sort of punches in the stomach, which for me, on one hand it's brilliant, on the other hand it could be painted as being a bit bland. It's not the most exciting engine. It's brilliant, but not, sometimes there are bikes in history that are just brilliant, but also because they're so good, they're a little bit dull. And I think this is on the borderline with that.
Do you know, I think that's just true of Triumph triples though. I remember so many times riding or racing Daytona 675, and before you know it, you're actually on the limiter. Like,
unless goes up to it,
there's no kind of
There's no surge
massive,
anywhere.
Yeah,
or,
no surge, no massive difference in tone or whatever. You can hear it's revving higher.
It's quite flat, isn't it? Yeah.
It is, and they obviously don't rev out, super high either.
No.
That's another thing. But for me, maybe I'm just a bit more boring. I like that. I like the predictability of it. I like the usability of it. What I maybe don't like so much about it are two things. One, the dash, it's a little bit slow to kind of start up and access the systems. And two, when you start looking into the tech, you're a little bit more limited than all the other bikes here, actually. Yeah. You can go in, it has got a rider mode, so you can go into the dash. You can change like ABS from road to track. You've got traction control that can be altered across basically 4 different modes when you're in rider. But you can't switch off wheelie control, which is something, again, all the other bikes here have got.
Yeah. There's no engine braking options on this either, is there?
No, there isn't. Yeah. I mean, it's not the most advanced in terms of technology, but it works. The systems that it's got are good. They're dependable. I can't actually criticize them in terms of how they perform. It's just a case of when you're comparing, apples with apples, you want the zest and the excitement of what the others have got too.
I agree. I think the tech is on one hand really frustrating for me, because on one hand you could argue, like you say, there's other bikes who've got so much more available. But on the other hand, you think, well, the tech it's got works really well. So what's the problem type thing? I've got to talk about the dash. The dash is one of life's great mysteries for me. How you can have so much space available and make it so impossible to read any of the information that's on there. What gear you're in, what revs you're on. It's extraordinary how that hasn't been changed yet. Of all the things they've changed on this bike, that survived from the last version. And of all the things that needed changing, in my opinion, that's it. It's just the most infuriating dashboard layout that I can think of, not just on any bike in this test, but any bike full stop.
One other area, just to throw another criticism its way, I'm not too keen on are the mirrors. The mirrors themselves actually work all right, because they're nice and broad, you can see what's going on behind you. I don't like having my hands trapped in.
You don't like that, do you?
No, I ride with my hand almost right at the end of the bar, and I do feel a little bit trapped sometimes. I don't know what I do with my fingers, but
weird.
I go to kind of grab the front brake and I get my little finger over the side of the bloody mirror thing, whatever, So that's my problem. It's not Triumph's, but personally, that's one thing that, I'm not overly keen on. But, I mean, other than that, it's a fantastic package, good brakes, good handling, good looks.
You've got to say something as well, at this price point, because this is a little over 11 grand.
Is that what it is?
Yeah. And, you've got Brembo Stylemas, you've got Öhlins in the back. There's some quality kit on it. It's not just, and I say that, in inverted commas, it's not just a brilliant engine and a brilliant chassis.
Yeah.
It's got top drawer kit on there as well, isn't it?
Yeah, you're getting the whole suite at a good price.
For 11 and a bit grand. It's madness.
So you agree it should be second then?
No.
Fucking thing, get out of it. So here we have our winner. So it's a bike that is all new for 2024. Johnny, you went on the launch of it a few weeks back. You came back buzzing, excited, and saying it was going to be a strong contender in this test. You weren't wrong.
Yeah, no, so you're dead right. I mean, KTM are on a real roll at the moment, and they're doing their own thing, they're going their own way. And their kind of whole philosophy is, big on torque, low on weight, really, really strong on ugly faces. Which I know is something you can relate to.
I don't want to look at you.
No, so what they've done with this bike is they've started completely from scratch. And the bike that came before it, obviously the 890 and the 790 Duke, was that kind of like sort of hybrid, motard, sort of naked bike sort of thing. It was a bit of a confusing, worked, did what it did, but it really didn't quite fit into this class properly, I would say. With this, they've kind of moved away from that sort of hybrid formula and gone full on naked sort of geometry, wheelbase, suspension, and here it is, the 990, brand new engine, brand new frame, brand new swing arm, brand new everything apart from the wheels and the front wheel and the calipers, which are off the Super Duke. As you say, I was really looking forward to getting this bike on the test because as well as being sure it was going to do well, I just think in the context of this test, it's doing a different thing. KTM have set their priorities completely different for this bike to the rest of them in the class, which I think has just sort of blown this class sort of open a bit well, quite a lot actually. You know, they're big on this instant punchy torque delivery, which the other bikes don't really have, and I think that's what really separates us. So it's really, really light, 179 kilos full of fuel, which puts it, you know, 9 kilos lighter than the Triumph, which is a light bike already. So, you know, that combination, I think, is what makes this bike feel so alive when you're out on the road. It's instant, it's punchy, and you just are sort of playing with it at all times, and yet it's got this level of refinement about it as well. We'll come on to the tech in a bit, but it was your first time out on it, and, you know, how did you find it? Did it meet my sort of expectations when I was jumping up and down about it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's very much a KTM. What I mean by that is it has got character. The engine, albeit being a parallel twin versus a V-twin like in the Super Duke, is still exciting and vibrant. And when I say notchy, I don't mean in an awkward way. What I mean is you kind of twist the throttle and it feels a bit more like a motocross bike in that you feel this torque on tap all the way through, you know, the spread of power. There's a bit of urgency there, and I like that. You know, you feel it, you hear it. It's definitely got zest, but it's also a very usable engine. I think I'm talking about the engine first because that's the biggest hook of this machine to me. It's the heart and soul of the bike. Yeah. And I think that for all the excitement of the triples in this test, actually this engine here was probably even more versatile. You know, it delivered well. It's got good initial punch the minute you touch that throttle, but you know, it can also kind of carry the revs to the upper echelons as well. And I think that, yeah, that I was surprised at how refined that package was. In saying that, though, as we've said before, like with the Super Dukes, with the bigger version of this machine here, that big 1290 or now 1390 shouldn't feel as smooth as it does. Yeah. So KTM are wizards when it comes to fueling their bikes well, and this is no exception. Really enjoyed that. The riding position as well, that was one of those things that it was just so accommodating straight away. You know, for a non-manly size, as you'd say, of 5'10", you kind of sit nicely on this bike. It's not, you know, massively high perched in the seat height. You know, the bars aren't awkwardly high or anything like that. It just sits you in it. You know, you're nice and chilled and relaxed. And you combine that kind of pliable riding position with great handling. It's not the sharpest turning of the bikes here. It's actually not the most stable either, but it's a good balance of both. And I think on the roads, you know, we've been traveling all kinds of roads at all kinds of speeds, especially the ones where you hit a few imperfections. It just seems to kind of plow through whatever nicely, reassuringly, you know, but not in a boring way. It doesn't kind of leave you feeling numb. You know, there's good connection to the ground, but you can feel what's going on beneath you. It does feel, I mean, it is a bigger bike than, say, the Triumph and whatnot, and you are perched up high. So it does feel like you use a bit more travel again through the suspension, but the way it's damped, it just works. You know, I'm not complaining about it.
So this is what they were saying on the launch of this bike. So obviously KTM own WP. So when they develop a new bike, they develop the suspension for that bike. It's not a proprietary item that's purchased in and bolted into something as we see on, well, pretty much everyone else's bikes. But by owning WP, from day one, they developed the suspension with the rest of the bike at the same time. So that is a big plus and advantage that KTM have at their disposal. And I think it fits exactly what you're saying. So it's no surprise that it is really, really suited to this bike. I mean, there's no preload adjustment on this, but it doesn't need it. So that's the suspension, you know. So they're really big on that, and they've really simplified it as well. So what you end up with is a suspension that hasn't got any preload adjustment. You might think, that's no good, but actually it doesn't need it. And the damping adjusters at the top, there's literally just 5 positions and a big dial that you can turn. So it's simplified, it's simple, and it's developed for this bike. So everything you need adjustment-wise is there for it. With the tech now, and I think KTM are really leading the way on this, I think, at the moment, in terms of their sort of boldness and putting everything on there. This thing has got everything on it, absolutely everything. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's a first, the anti-wheelie on it is also adjustable now. So you can... Yeah, it is, I'm not aware of another bike.
You had yours stuck on low, didn't you?
I was really low, yeah, exactly. I was scared.
You nailed them.
I absolutely
nailed them.
Yeah, oh yeah, big effort. But no, I can't think of a bike that, obviously there are bikes out there with anti-wheelie, there's some on this test, but an adjustable anti-wheelie, and it literally has a picture of a bike.
Yeah.
That has, low.
How big do you want it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Where do you want it to sit on?
Yeah.
Sort of thing. And that's. I think that's everything you need to know about this bike in one thing, really.
I just think it's a nice bike. It works well. It surprised me when I saw it because I'm not immediately drawn to the look of it.
Well, yeah.
But when you're riding it, you're not looking at it.
No.
You're just appreciating it for the package that it is. And it's a bike that stops well, goes well, feels comfy all day long.
Playful.
Yeah. It just
Fun.
ticks the boxes. It's physically, actually, I think it's taller than the Ducati as well. I think it's actually the biggest bike of all of these on test. So, it's a big bike in terms of stance, as well as engine and output and all the rest of it. And in terms of versatility as well, I dare say that's the thing that's kind of made it the top trump on this test here, that it's just so usable in all conditions. It goes well whether you want to be tootling along or hammering it, backed up by that good tech and good gearbox and all the rest of it. So, it's a deserving winner.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it is its biggest asset. I mean, dynamically, it is completely competent, as good as anything else here, and it's got that good riding position. But for me, it's just about that fun factor. It just is so much more playful than the others. And I think for this type of bike, the purpose of this bike is basically mainly to be on the road, isn't it? So given that, you can have a lot of playful fun on this without having to ride around like your hair's on fire kind of thing, which is a little bit the same characteristic. Well, it's not a little bit, it's exactly the same characteristic of the Super Duke, which obviously we're big fans of as well. So, and I think it's really important that a bike delivers on a bike whose purpose is to be on the road. It delivers on fun really easily, makes that accessible, and I'm glad it's done well here. It deserves to do well, like you say.
So there we have it, a deserving winner. Fair play to KTM. They've really come out with a corker of a machine. But the elephant in the room is the fact that we haven't got Yamaha's MT-09 in this mix. I dare say it would have been right up there and pushing all of the bikes to their max to try and take the crown. Unfortunately, we just couldn't get hold of one in time. We did try really, really quite hard. I tested one only a few weeks ago out in Lanzarote, cracking machine, as up-to-date and contemporary as any of these bikes. So if you are considering the sub-litre nature for the road, make sure that that is in the mix. But anyway, that's the score. So moving on, finally, I just want to say thank you to all the manufacturers for getting stuck in, and especially to Chris Walker for letting us borrow his Street Fighter for this test. It was great to have it in the mix, and fair play. If you want to go and test ride that bike, it's now back in the showroom. Go see him in Grantham. Thank you to Bridgestone, thank you to R&G, thank you to you, Johnny.
You're very welcome.
But this test is not over yet. If you want to see more action from it, we're about to take all of these machines on track at Cadwell Park to really put them through their paces and see if that pecking order remains the same when pushed to their limits. Stay tuned to find out.